Welcome to Sleep Flow Studio. Tonight we drift slowly into the quiet deserts of ancient Iran, where wind moves across silent cliffs and time folds itself into layers of salt and stone. This is the story of the Salt Man of Iran, a tale that moves at the pace of sand, slow enough to guide your eyes to rest. Long before roads were drawn on maps and long before caravans crossed the empty plains, there was a narrow valley in the land we now call Iran. Its cliffs rose like pale walls, smooth in some places and cracked in others, shaped by centuries of sun and wind. Beneath these cliffs lay a great salt mine, not a grand place, not the kind filled with noise, but a modest slope cut into the hillside, where the earth opened just enough to reveal the crystals hidden inside. In those distant centuries, miners walked through the valley at dawn, their sandals brushing the dust in slow, steady steps. They carried simple tools made of wood and bronze. Nothing hurried them. The days were long. The work moved at the rhythm of breath and earth. The Salt Man was one of them. No one remembers his name. No stories of his family were written down, but the desert remembers, the cliffs remember, and the salt itself remembers in its own silent way. He walked each morning before the sun rose fully over the mountains. The light came softly through the valley, turning the surface of the cliffs the color of warm clay. He would pause at the entrance to the mine, listening to the faint echo of the wind moving through unseen chambers deep within. Then he stepped inside where the air felt cool and still. The world inside the mine was quiet. Salt crystals grew in gentle patterns across the walls, pale blue in places, white as bone in others. Drops of water gathered in slow beads, forming tiny mirrors that caught the lantern light. Every sound traveled far. The faint tap of a tool, the shuffle of a foot, the distant groan of the mountain settling deeper into itself. The Salt Man worked with a calm precision, shaping blocks of salt, each one meant for trade along the early pathways of the region. Salt was precious then, used for food, for preservation, for medicine. A simple thing, yet valued more than gold in some seasons. Outside, caravans waited. Camels rested with folded legs. The sun rose higher. Shadows stretched across the open valley. Life moved slowly, as if the entire world was taking its time. One morning, the Salt Man walked deeper into the mine than usual. Perhaps he followed a new seam of crystals. Perhaps he was searching for a larger deposit. The details are lost to time, swallowed by silence. But as he moved farther in, the mountain shifted. A low rumble rolled through the tunnels like a distant sigh. Powder fell from the ceiling in a thin cloud. And then, without warning, the earth collapsed around him. There was no struggle recorded, no witnesses who spoke of it. The mine simply closed, sealing the Salt Man inside. The valley returned to its quiet. The caravans came and went. Seasons turned. Centuries passed one after another as gently as waves against an ancient shore. And deep inside the mountain, the salt man rested in the embrace of the mine. The salt, with its strange patience, preserved him. Slowly, carefully, layer upon layer. Salt does not hurry. Salt keeps what it touches. It held his hair, his clothing, even the lines of his face. Time folded around him like a blanket. The desert above changed shape. Kingdoms rose and vanished. Roads formed. Travelers passed without knowing the story beneath their feet. Then one day, many centuries later, modern miners working in the same valley uncovered a shape. Not stone, not crystal, but something human. They found the salt man exactly as the mine had left him, quiet, preserved, resting in the cool white light of the chamber. A visitor from a world so old it felt like a dream. The historians who arrived studied every detail. The curve of his beard, the woven threads of his clothing, the earring still in his ear. He was no king, no warrior, no ruler etched in grand books. Just an ordinary worker remembered because the earth held him gently for so long. Today he rests not in the desert, but in a museum under soft lights. People pass slowly before him, whispering in the calm halls. His story is told quietly, in small plaques and careful descriptions. But the salt remembers more than the words reveal. It remembers the early mornings, the sound of tools against crystal, the breath of a man deep in the mine, the stillness of a world not yet touched by haste. And as you drift into sleep now, you can imagine the easy calm of that valley, the sun low, the cliffs pale, the wind moving with the slow rhythm of ages. A world where nothing rushed, where everything took the time it needed, where even a simple worker could be carried across centuries by the patient hands of the earth. Let the story settle like salt on still water. Let the quiet reach you the way it once filled the old mine. Let the slow passing of ancient time guide you gently toward rest. He remained in the museum under steady lights, untouched by the rush of the world outside. Visitors came and went, their footsteps soft against polished floors. Some paused only for a moment, glancing at the ancient figure before moving on to brighter displays. Others stood longer, studying the folds of his clothing or the curve of his preserved beard. They whispered, as though afraid to disturb the silence that seemed to cling to him. The scholars who worked nearby learned to speak quietly in those halls. They handled fragments of pottery, bits of woven cloth, and tools that once belonged to men like him. Each artifact carried a small piece of the past, but none as vivid as the man who had slept in salt for centuries. They often wondered about his life before the mine. They imagined the village he came from, perhaps a cluster of simple homes with low walls, where smoke rose from clay ovens each morning. In that imagined village, The salt man might have had a small room with a wooden door and a woven mat, a place where he left his sandals before sleeping. Maybe he had a wife who woke before dawn to grind grain in a quiet rhythm. Perhaps children played outside in the dust, drawing lines with sticks or chasing goats through narrow paths. There are no records of any of it, only silence where those memories should be. Yet the silence is gentle, not empty, as though those lost details exist somewhere just out of reach. The mine itself still sits in the valley, though the tools and methods have changed. The cliffs around it remain pale, rising in still shapes against the sky. When the wind passes through, it carries a faint taste of salt as if the earth is exhaling. Travelers who visit sometimes stand at the entrance and listen to the quiet. The air inside remains cool, and their lanterns reflect on crystals that formed long before they were born. Near the entrance, there is a faint echo, the same kind the salt man would have heard every morning. The sound seems to drift deeper into the chambers, touching the same surfaces he once touched. Passing over carved walls and narrow passages, it moves slowly as though exploring the mine all over again. Historians often say that the valley is not empty. They say the salt man is still part of it even now. Not in a haunting way, but in a peaceful one, as though his presence lingers in the stillness. Woven into the calm of the cliffs, the salt kept him not only in body but in connection, holding the threads of a forgotten life gently in place. At night, when the museum grows quiet, there is a different sort of stillness. The lights dim, the halls empty, and the soft hum of the building settles into a low sigh. In that silence, the salt man seems less like an exhibit and more like a traveler resting after a long journey. He lies in the same calm posture that time gave him, unchanged even as centuries drifted overhead. Some believe that objects hold memories. If that is true, then the salt around him must remember everything. It remembers the footsteps that approached the mine each morning. It remembers the lantern he might have carried. It remembers the steady swing of his tools, the rhythm that matched his breath, and the slight pause when he wiped dust from his face. It remembers the moment the earth shifted and the stillness that followed. And now, as the world grows quiet around you, that same slow stillness opens like a doorway. You can almost hear the desert wind moving across the valley. You can almost feel the cool air of the mine, the air that has not hurried for thousands of years. Every sound feels far away, softened by distance, softened by time. Let your thoughts drift the way sand drifts across old paths. Let each moment lengthen and slow, as if the world itself is breathing deeper, settling into rest. The salt man belonged to a time when nights were darker, when silence was fuller, when people worked with rhythms that matched the land around them. Allow that rhythm to unfold now, soft, unbroken, steady, like grains of salt falling through the fingers of time, carrying you gently into sleep. In the quiet hours before dawn, the museum rests in a kind of hush that feels older than the building itself. The air settles, the walls cool, and every object seems to drift a little deeper into its own stillness. The glass around the salt man reflects only a faint glimmer from the night lights above, creating a soft halo that blurs at the edges. Nothing moves, nothing disturbs the calm. If someone were to walk through the hall at that hour, they might notice how peaceful the atmosphere becomes. They might see how the salt man appears almost to blend with the shadows, as if he were returning to the gentle dimness of the mine he once knew. The lines of his clothing, the delicate folds preserved by time, look like the quiet ripples of fabric laid out the night before a long rest. Some researchers say that even though centuries have passed, the salt man feels closer to us than many artifacts do. His presence carries a kind of softness, less like a relic and more like a reminder of someone who once moved through the world with steady purpose. His hands once held tools, his feet once crossed stones, and his eyes once adjusted to the shifting glow of lantern light. All of that has vanished into history, yet a quiet echo of his life remains. Far away in the valley where he lived, the nights fall in that same slow way. The wind moves gently over the ground, brushing against the stone paths and the low shrubs scattered across the slope. Stars gather above the cliffs just as they have for thousands of years. Travelers who visit the area say that nighttime in that valley feels unusually calm, as though time itself stretches out, giving each moment a little more room to breathe. In the old days, before the salt man entered the mine for the last time, he would have known these nights well. He may have stepped outside after a day's work, letting the cool air wash the dust from his thoughts. He might have listened to the rustle of distant animals settling down or watched the faint glow of fires burning in nearby homes. There are no records to confirm any of this, yet these small images feel natural, almost expected, simple scenes that fit quietly into the spaces history left open. Back in the museum, those imagined moments seem to linger around him, as if memory and silence weave together. The light on the glass softens even more as hours pass. Shadows stretch slowly, taking their time across the floor. Every detail becomes gentler, drifting like fine dust settling onto stone. Some nights, the museum staff who clean the halls say they feel unusually calm near his display. They walk a little slower. Their footsteps soften without them trying. They describe it as a comforting stillness, the kind that encourages deep breaths and unhurried thoughts. No one knows why, but perhaps the human mind recognizes something steady in the presence of age, something patient and unbroken. And now that same patience reaches toward you, inviting your thoughts to drift at their own pace. Let the edges of your mind soften the way the museum lights soften across the glass. Let the quiet deepen around your breathing, slow and gentle. Imagine the cool, silent air of the valley, untouched by rush or noise. Imagine the dim, salt-lined tunnels of the mine, where time moves like sand through small cracks. Steady, quiet, unhurried. You are safe here in this silence, safe in this slow unfolding of moments, safe in the calm that stretches calmly through centuries. Let that calm wrap around you and guide you deeper into rest, into softness, into sleep. In those final lingering moments before sleep fully settles, the world around the salt man seems to blur into one long, gentle breath. The museum grows still in a way that feels almost natural, as though the quiet is not an absence of sound, but a presence of something older, something steady and enduring, like the slow settling of salt crystals deep underground. If you imagine standing there alone, the air would feel soft and cool, untouched by the day's movement. The floor beneath you would hold the faint echo of countless footsteps, all of them fading into the hush of the night. The glass around the salt man would catch only the smallest reflections, tiny points of light that drift like distant stars across a calm sky. The centuries that carried him here seemed to fold neatly into that stillness. They no longer feel heavy or distant. They become gentle, like thin layers of dust settling on a forgotten vessel, untouched and undisturbed. Time in this place feels like a slow river, steady, quiet, not in a hurry to go anywhere. Some historians believe that artifacts like him teach us the value of silence. Not spoken silence, but the kind that rests inside old objects, the kind that gathers in empty spaces and long-closed rooms. They believe that this deep quiet holds memories the way salt holds shape, preserving moments not as stories, but as feelings that drift softly through the mind. And perhaps that is why the salt man's presence feels so calming. There is no urgency in him, no noise, no rush, no demand to remember anything clearly. Just a gentle reminder that life, even long after it passes, settles into a peaceful rhythm that cannot be hurried. As the night deepens, the museum's lights dim a little more. The shadows lengthen, soft-edged and harmless. The air cools and the silence smooths itself across every surface, like a blanket being slowly unfolded. In that quiet, you can almost sense the mine again, cool, dark, endless in its calm. You can feel the slow breath of the underground air. You can imagine grains of salt glinting faintly in torchlight, like tiny pieces of sleep drifting through the air. There is no sound, only the subtle pulse of the earth resting in its own ancient peace. Let that peace settle into you now. Let your thoughts loosen and drift away. Let the quiet wrap around you like a warm, heavy comfort that softens each breath. You are safe in this moment. You are resting in the hands of time itself, slow, gentle, and endlessly patient. Allow your eyes to grow heavier. Allow the stillness to deepen. Allow sleep to rise softly around you, the way salt once rose around a traveler long, long ago, and let yourself drift, calmly, quietly, into deep, unbroken, Rest.